The chime of the bell beckons us into a sacred time. Welcome to the First Unitarian Universalist Church of Houston, where we widen love's circle by honoring the inherent worth and dignity of all. We extend a heartfelt and inclusive invitation to join us in meaningful worship and in service to the world. We greet all those who join us this morning, those here in our sanctuary, all of our many online viewers, así como el creciente número de participantes bilingües que nos acompañan desde sus hogares. Mask wearing in this sanctuary is currently optional, but you are encouraged to continue to wear yours if you are more comfortable doing so. I invite newcomers to join us for coffee and conversation in Channing Hall after the service. And I invite members to seek out someone you have not yet met and make a new friend. Jolie is out. She's slightly under the weather, nothing to be concerned about, but she has left our music today in the more than capable hands of Symphony in Chelsea. So please join them for our first hymn.
Good morning, everybody. If you could please join me in your gray hymnals for hymn number 361. Please rise and join me in body and or spirit as we sing number 361 in your gray hymnal. Enter.
Are there certain things that endure? The sun rises, the same moon shines, the earth spins on her axis, the planets dance across the Milky Way, gravity fixes us to the floor, the bodies shift. Oh, how much change there is, the transience of me, of you. The tree is different each time. This bud becomes leaf. Leaf flecks brown, falls, turns to dirt. The journey of seed to flower to fruit to seed. Shall we praise the transient, this life, that thunderstorm? Shall we praise the permanent? Is there anything that endures across eternity? we gather this morning, a community humbly casting questions, gathering without creed, seeking understanding, but wary of ultimate answers. You cannot step into the same river twice. What is true today may not be true tomorrow. We gather this Sunday, a religious community for inquiry, for exploration, for questing after the holy, the sacred, the divine, the truth, whatever we might name it. We gather this morning certain, changing, questioning, and sometimes, maybe, even finding something worthy to share. Come, friends, may what is worth sharing grow amongst us in this hour, and let us worship together.
Please join with me in reciting our congregational covenant found in your order of service. Love is the spirit of our congregation. Service is our prayer. To dwell together in peace, to seek truth in love, and to encourage one another. Thus do we covenant.
Well, good morning. One of the things I have said several times in my sermons is I really can't imagine myself telling you all what to think, but I can help you ask better questions. And today we have the chance to see if you all are going to ask better questions because it's our question box service. So people have been putting questions in that red box for a couple weeks, and Reverend Colin is going to answer them a little bit later. Now, UU congregations have held this kind of service since the 50s. We couldn't pin down exactly when they started, but at least since the 50s. So we perceive preaching as a dialogue, but this kind of takes it to a different level. So you're asking questions, and Colin is going to be answering them. Usually these happen during the summer when we want to shake things up a little bit and do something a little bit different, maybe a little more fun and laid back, and so we're looking forward to this today. We had 12 questions submitted, and I'll be pulling them at random to see what Colin says. Now, during this second service, we chose a couple for the kids to choose from, so they'll be up here asking some of their questions as well, and we're going to give them, and this should be interesting, give them the chance to ask some questions off the cuff as well. So we're looking forward to that. At least I am. We'll see if Colin is. This is the time during the service when we pause for contemplation. The heat and the summer activities fluster us. The altered patterns of our lives distract us. And so, with intention and care, we carve out this time to enter into a time of quietness. It may be the sole time this week when we have the chance to silence our minds and still our hearts. This is a time that some call meditation and others name prayer. Breathe with me as we gather to do the holy work of kinship and support. Open your mind, open your heart. God of many names and mystery beyond all our naming, we have so many questions. Despite our advancements and best efforts, it seems like our world is taking one step forward and two steps back. With heartache and humility, we wonder why. We have always craved knowledge. One of the earliest stories in the Hebrew Bible tells of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, whose fruit was forbidden. But later in Isaiah we read, "Come now, let us reason together, says the Lord." We hear the words of Galileo, who declared, "I do not feel obliged to believe that the same God who has endowed us with sense, reason, and intellect has intended us to forego their use." But we know we will not gain all the knowledge we crave. Much is beyond our grasp and understanding. Grant us the humility to accept our humanness. But we can strive to gain understanding, if not knowledge. Help us to gain the ability to be more understanding of others and ever more kind and loving. We hear the words of Rilke, who told his protege, to be patient towards all that is unsolved in your heart and try to love the questions themselves. The point is to live everything. Live the questions now. Help us with love and humility to live and love the questions now, knowing if not answers, we may be given a greater understanding of how to live in a world with so many unanswered questions. Help us to know that we may learn from the experience of asking, even if we do not get an answer, and especially if we do not get the answer we are anticipating. We pray in the names of all those known and unknown, present and absent, remembered and forgotten. We pray in the names of all helpers of humankind. Amen. We pause now together to lift up that which sits heavy and light on our hearts. A reminder that the memorial service for longtime member Cynthia Conwell is being planned for July 29th at 11 a.m. We now turn to a practice inspired by African, indigenous, and pagan traditions. We say aloud or bring to mind those who we wish to be held by the loving embrace of this religious community. They are part of the great cloud of witness and memory, and we will, even if we do not know their names, hold them in our hearts. In this great cloud of witness and memory, amid this beloved community, we hear these names and hold them in our hearts. Let us remember the suffering and joy amid and among our community that we do not know. We pause in awe and wonder of the beauty, diversity, and mystery that is life. In the spirit of love, in the spirit of hope, and in the spirit of compassion, I invite each of you to enter into a time of silent prayer, meditation, or reflection.
Each week, our morning offering is shared with an organization that shares our Unitarian Universalist values and through which we may live out our principles in the world. This week, that organization is the Montrose Center. Since 1978, the Montrose Center has helped LGBTQ+ youth and adults live healthy, actualized lives with the tools and resources they need to feel affirmed. The organization provides an array of programs and services, including mental and behavioral health, anti-violence services, support groups, and specialized services for youth, seniors, and those living with HIV. It now operates the nation's largest LGBTQ-affirming, affordable senior living center in the nation, the Law Harrington Senior Living Center. As the politics of hate make living in Texas more and more dangerous for sexual minorities, especially the trans community, our support of organizations like the Montrose Center is more important than ever. Those in our sanctuary will find the instructions for text giving in the order of service, and those watching the live stream will see the instructions on your screen. Our regular Sunday morning offering collection invites us to weave a tapestry of love and action. We ask that you give generously. An offering will now be gratefully received.
Please join with me in reciting the words to dedicate our offering found in your order of service. To the work of this church, which is weaving a tapestry of love and action, we dedicate our lives, and these are our offerings.
All right. Please join me in your teal hymnals for hymn 1003. In your teal hymnals, hymn 1003. Now this one's a little bit special. It's a round. So we're going to split into 4 groups. All right? 4 groups. Okay, we're going to try this out. So if you are on the left, well, my left, your right. If you are on the right side, in the back, your group number 1. If you are on the right side, closer to the front, your group number 2. Okay? Same for the left side, have to mirror it. Your group 4 in the front, and group number 3 in the back. I did that backwards, but that's okay. So we're going to try it out. We're going to sing each line 2 times, all right? And after we sing the whole thing through, I'm going to hold up my fingers for who's going to be starting, okay? It'll work out, I hope, okay? So when you see group 1, you're going to start on line 1. When you see 2, group 2, you're going to start on line 1. When you see 3, group 3, you're going to start on line 3. Group 1, sorry. That's right. When you see 4, you're going to start on line 1. There you go. All right. Y'all got it? We all got it. Let's go. All together. And where do we come from? What are we? Where
I was so taken with your singing, I forgot where we were in the program. I'm really excited about this. I always wanted to be Alex Trebek. So,
So we're in a game show now?
yes.
So what prize do I get if I win?
A year's worth of rice-a-roni, the San
wow.
Francisco treat. Okay, so these are the questions that I've put on cards that you all have asked, and I am mixing them up, and so he doesn't know what order I'm going to put them. So this one's from Symphony. This is Symphony's.
okay.
What instrument would you be and why?
Okay, well, I think that, well, there's an easy answer for this. I think that I would be two techniques, which are turntables and a mixing board, because I grew up in the house and techno scenes in Chicago and Detroit, and electronic music has always been very much sort of my favorite music, electronic dance music. And I very much have taken the kind of aesthetic of that kind of hip-hop house mixing into, I think, the way I think about preaching, where you sort of are taking different elements from different stories and narratives to craft together to put together a new narrative or story. And so I think about that a lot.
Cool. I wasn't expecting that one. I knew he was interested in that kind of music, but I wasn't expecting that. This one's a little deeper. Mary Cook asks, how do you maintain your faith?
Whew, that's that's a very it's a simple question with a really complicated answer, right? So, like, on one level, I have a regular spiritual practice that just sort of keeps me grounded, right? So I do about 30 minutes of reading from different religious traditions, scriptures, poetry, and Unitarian Universalist theology every morning, and then work in my journal for a while. And that helps me sort of stay grounded. But in terms of faith, I guess that's maybe synonymous with hope in a particular way. And I feel like in this moment, you know, where we have a heat dome trapped over the top of Texas and discordant and divisive politics, it's a hard question to sort of think about. One of my mentors, the folk singer Utah Phillips, used to talk about the view from the top and the view from the bottom. And so, like, he was like, if you look at society from the top, what's going on at the macro level, it's almost always hard to find hope, because, like, the sort of big moments of, like, transformative positive change come, you know, once every generation, if even, like, that often, right? So if you're sort of looking for, like, you know, some big shift up at that level, you're often going to sort of wallow in hopelessness. But if you look at the view from the bottom, like, what are things on the grassroots doing and how is that happening? There's often a lot of places to find hope. And here I sort of think about Grace Lee Boggs, who somebody will be talking about later in the year, who is another, I don't know if I would say mentor, but I was privileged to know her. And she lived in Detroit in the 20th century and sort of witnessed the complete collapse of that city and sort of the factories going away and the jobs going away and neighborhoods becoming really desolate and crime-ridden. And, I mean, to the point where when I was growing up, there was something called Devil's Night, where people would set arson in the city as a way to sort of clear out empty houses, right? So Grace met somebody who was from the South, who'd come up north from the Great Migration, who was really interested in gardening. And he had been a sharecropper back in, like, I don't know, the 1930s or something like that. And the two of them realized, looking around, that there was all this empty land, and they lived in a neighborhood called the Black Bottom, which is not like the Bottoms here in Houston, which is called the Bottoms because it's a really poor neighborhood. It's called the Black Bottom because it was right by the river and had deep, deep topsoil. And the two of them realized, we have all this beautiful topsoil that we're sitting on top of. So what if we started community gardens? And they actually started community gardening in Detroit in like the 80s in all of these vacant lots. And sort of two things started to happen. One was they taught people to feed themselves and have sort of a sense of community and connection. And then the other thing is, because of that, they started to really revitalize parts of the city. And so crime rates went down, people started to feel better about living in those neighborhoods. Some really amazing art movements came out of there. It's not an all rosy picture. There's lots of, Detroit is still a very intense city, and they certainly were not like fully successful, but it was really amazing to watch over the course of kind of 20 years, because they started that when I was a kid, and sort of see this transition of urban agriculture and the way that it really impacted a generation of people.
Really interesting. Thank you. Nancy Edwards asks, can you hear? There we go. Nancy Edwards asked, when are we going to have Bach, Beethoven, etc., and organ music again?
So I think there's a lot of answers to this question. One of them is that I understand we had either Bach or Beethoven, and Chelsea, you can let me know which one, because I don't remember, like 2 weeks ago. Bach. We had Bach 2 weeks ago in the service, so it's not like there isn't Bach. Another thing to know is that the organ is being played less often right now because it needs about $50,000 worth of repairs, which is part of the proposed capital campaign. So if you want to hear the organ more often,
Hint, hint.
you're going to have to help raise the money for that this fall. Because Chelsea's a wonder, but she's only able to do so much with an instrument that's sort of slightly permanently out of tune at this point. But another answer to this question is in part, like, we've really, with Jolie, who's been our music director now for the last year and a half, actually, really tried to be working on diversifying the musical offerings in the congregation. And it turns out that, like, one of the best ways to try to build a more diverse congregation is to diversify the musical offerings. And so if you look at, like, the handful of Unitarian Universalist congregations in the country that have become more multiracial, so many of them have really transformed their music program from something that focused on sort of classical music and folk music to having a wider selection of stuff. So there'll still be Bach and Beethoven, but we're going to keep expanding.
So they're still there, maybe just not as often, but they're still there.
Well, let me say one other thing. I think that, like, actually, if you're going to become a more multicultural congregation, that means that the people who are here and have been here for a long time have to give up a little something to make other people feel comfortable and have to make room for somebody else, right? And so, like, I think part of, like, having a bit less Bach and Beethoven and a bit more jazz or funk or the like is about making more room for different voices and different perspectives.
Thank you. Derek Elliott asks, what is the significance of samadhi? Is that pronounced correctly? Samadhi, and how may it be applied to our everyday lives?
So I'm going to stick with the English because my Sanskrit is not great. And so there's samadhi is a word that comes from the Sanskrit that means different things in different traditions from the Indian subcontinent. So I don't really actually know what sense that's being asked in, because it means one thing in yoga, another thing in one kind of Buddhism, another thing in a different kind of Buddhism, right? So I think for me, the word translates to kind of concentration, and I get that from Thich Nhat Hanh, the Buddhist monk who we'll also be talking about later this year, who is practiced something called engaged Buddhism. And he really thought of, and it wasn't original to him, but in his sort of interpretation or tradition of Buddhism, there were sort of three kinds of meditative consciousness. And concentration is the second one. So there's awareness, concentration, and insight. And he understood this process as sort of, I'm aware of my surroundings, I'm aware of what I'm doing, I'm aware that I'm breathing, I'm aware that I'm in this room. That's sort of the first step in meditative consciousness. Then there's concentration, like I'm focusing on what is going on, like I'm understanding that I'm breathing. Like I'm not just aware of it, but I'm concentrating on the act of breathing in and breathing out, right? I'm experiencing it sort of fully. And then from that full experience, that full concentration on it, comes insight. And the insight is, of course, going to be different in some level for the different things that you're like engaging with, whether it's your breathing, your walking, this microphone, you know. And the insight is going to be somewhat different. And in his understanding of Buddhism, salvation really comes from insight rather than from grace. So Christians think of grace as sort of this external thing that's happening to you. But for him, it's this insight of like waking up, experiencing kind of what is going on.
Fascinating. Thank you.
I think one more question after this, then we got.
I was going to say we may need to hear some music after this question, so we can take a breather. Oh, this is from the friendly voice you hear when you call the office, Gaspar Tisnato. What are some philosophers you would recommend to someone interested in Unitarian Universalism?
I mean, the sort of classic answer to that question is always going to be Ralph Waldo Emerson, Henry David Thoreau, and Margaret Fuller. I'm not actually certain I would start with them, or even, well, I guess I just did. But I am aware. I am being aware. So, yeah, but, you know, they're 19th century figures and sort of weighted with all of the Anglo-whiteness culture of New England transcendentalism. And so, actually, the person, and so there's a lot of other people that one can look to, right? Here in Houston, we might look at Tony Pinn, who teaches at Rice, who is certainly one of the most influential contemporary Unitarian Universalist thinkers. He's an advocate of Black humanism and has written 20-some books on that subject, including things wrestling with the question of evil in human existence, how hip-hop and religion intersect, art and religion. Then also maybe Sharon Welch, who is another contemporary Unitarian Universalist humanist figure who thinks about the intersection of feminism and ethics and wrote a book on the feminist ethics of risk. Although the actual, like, I guess the thing about this is, so I'm writing a book right now on this, like, Unitarian Universalist theology. And the person that I start with actually is Robert Wedderburn, who's a very not well-known early 18th century British and Jamaican Unitarian preacher who was sort of largely excised from the canon, but does kind of all the things that we think of Unitarian Universalism today as doing. He's engaging in blending different religious traditions, in his case, Orisha worship or Obeah worship from Jamaica and Christianity. He's interested in the question of social salvation rather than individual salvation. He's interested in the question of how do you build like a multicultural, multiracial congregation. So I guess that's who I start with. So that's,
for those taking notes to look this person up later, spell that name.
Wedderburn.
Thank you, because it sounds like someone we need to look up.
Yeah, I did a sermon on him a couple of months ago, so there should be that out there too.
I knew it sounded familiar.
All right.
We are going to take a brief break and have our talented musicians lead us in a song, and we will be back for some more questions in a moment.
All right. Excellent questions. Can you please turn in your teal hymnals to hymn number 1020, and we're going to be singing a song that is familiar to you guys. So, well, yeah. All right. So please rise in body and or spirit, and we will sing hymn number 1020. We are going, heaven knows where we are going, but we know it is, and we will get there. Heaven knows how we will get there, but we know we will. It will be hard, we know, and the road will be muddy and rough, but we'll get there. Heaven knows how we will get there, but we know we will. Oh yeah, yeah. Oh yeah, yeah. Oh yeah, yeah. Oh yeah, yeah. We are going. Heaven knows where we are going, but we know it is, and we will get there. Heaven knows how we will get there, but we know we will. Oh yeah, yeah. Oh yeah, yeah. Oh yeah, yeah. Oh yeah, yeah. Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
Thank you. Let's see what we come up with next. Oh, this is another one from Symphony. How have things from your past influenced how you minister today?
So my friend Alma Faith Crawford used to be the professor of homiletics at Starking School for the Ministry in Berkeley. And when people asked her, how did you prepare for a sermon, she said, well, I spent my whole life preparing for it. So, and her point was sort of like everything you do somehow goes into your preaching. You draw from pretty much everything. So, I think like some of the obvious answers are my family of origin and kind of how that shaped me. My experiences in seminary and then at graduate school at Harvard. My experience growing up a Unitarian Universalist. I think probably the more, I talk about it in my preaching, so it's not probably a shock to people, but I think my experience in the labor movement, really probably more than anything else other than those things, the labor movement, and then also the many years I spent heavily involved in the dance music scene, right? Because in both those cases, there's a question of sort of how do you build like a community for liberation, and how do we do those things together, and also, in the labor movement, there's a real question of how can we build more democracy into like people's lives, and how do we do it through our organizing. And certainly like getting back to an earlier question, like my faith, so much of it has come from like doing impossible things in the labor movement. Things that like, I started the Harvard Graduate Students Union with 4 other people at a time when people basically said, no one's going to ever organize a labor union in an Ivy League institution, right? And like, 10 years, 11 years after we started that, Harvard has a graduate union, several other graduate student unions are at like major Ivy League schools, and like those unions have had a huge impact on people's lives. So like, that was supposed to be impossible. People had tried it for like 40 some years, and somehow we were able to do that. So, those kind of experiences, I think, give me hope for the ability of a small band of scrappy Unitarian Universalists to do something of use as well.
Very cool. Well, this is a long one. This is from Carl Walther. The growing number of unchurched, nothing in particular affiliated persons of low education income level may be contributing to the anomic political anger, susceptibility to demagoguery plaguing our society. A conventional religion like Unitarian Universalism seems to be ideal to bring these people back into positive community relationships, yet it seems to attract primarily the educated and progressive. Is there a way to attract these people into our wonderful and supportive UU fold?
Not an easy question, right? So I think, like, one of the questions that I would have back is, like, what is it that we're offering people? And I think that, and then how are we letting people know that they're welcome and offering that to them? And so, I mean, like, I feel like in the state of Texas right now, where we have a governor who is an advocate of what I call the politics of cruelty, I think we have a lot to offer people in the sense of a community that is saying, you're welcome here, whether you're an immigrant, whether you're a trans person, black, white, queer. So we have that message, and I think that message is important and powerful. So the question becomes then, how do we welcome people into the congregation? And I think that really requires a real openness to change on our part, which I think is really challenging. Gets back to the Bach and Beethoven question. It gets back to how do we welcome people and invite people into congregational life. And it also, I think, gets into a question of how do we show up in the community. So a thing that we're working on right now is a Labor Song and Story Festival for Labor Day weekend, where we're working with the Gulf Coast AFL-CIO to tell stories of union organizing and sing through the labor songbook. And like, I think it's important that we do things like that kind of really offer a way to kind of walk the walk in a different way than just sort of sitting and saying we're so great because we're so accepting and welcoming. I probably could have a better answer, but well, I guess the other thing is that there are churches that have kind of done this over the years. So Community Church in New York at one point in time did this, and they really did it by showing up for the community and being a place where people where they understood salvation to be a social thing and something that was a terrestrial thing, right? So it's not something that happens after life, and it's something that we get to together.
Cool. I'm going to ask one more question, and then we get to sing again. Ron Cookston asks, what is the greatest challenge that we as a unique collection of people pose for your ministry, and how can we make that easier?
Well, I mean, I think that the part of the answer to that question is it changes all the time, right? It's not like there's one challenge that's consistent, which is one of the things that I think makes being a Unitarian Universalist minister fun. I mean, when I got here, the challenge was sort of holding the congregation together after its second negotiated resignation in a decade, and figuring out how to handle the then multi-site model of the congregation, which was creating a huge amount of stress in the church, right? So that was 2018, 2019. The next year, it was the pandemic, right? And then in the middle of the pandemic came the question of, okay, how do we wind down the whole multi-site ministry with the satellite congregation out in Richmond? Now I think the question is, how do we live into our new vision and mission of being an urban, multicultural, multiracial congregation that's really devoted to widening Love Circle, and how do we how do we handle the growth that we're experiencing? I mean, we have had a lot of growth in the last year. There have been Sundays this July, late June and July, where we've had more people in the building than we did for the Christmas services, which is just like kind of mind-blowing to me.
Unheard of.
Right. Not at the 9:30 service, though. So if you're looking around and like, what's going and so I think that how do we accommodate that change? How do we be open to that change, I think is really important. And I think that one of the big questions for the congregational leadership is, how do people who have been in leadership for a long time sort of step back and mentor new people into leadership roles, understanding that their needs and their vision for the congregation are going to be different than the people who have been here for a long time. So.
Well, thank you so much. I've enjoyed this. I think it's been fun. So now we'll throw it over to Symphony and Chelsea.
All right, everyone, if you could please turn in your gray hymnal to hymn number 16, "'Tis a Gift to Be Simple." All right. Please rise in body and or spirit as we sing hymn number 16 in your gray hymnal. And we'll sing it through twice. "'Tis a gift to be simple, 'tis a gift to be free, 'tis a gift to come down where we ought to be. And when we find ourselves in a place just right, we'll be in the valley of love and delight. When true simplicity is gained, to bow and to bend we should be ashamed. To turn, we are delight, we are turning we come and rise. 'Tis a gift to be simple, 'tis a gift to be free, 'tis a gift to come down where we ought to be. And when we find ourselves in the place just right, to be in the valley of love and delight. When true simplicity is gained, to bow and to bend we should be ashamed. Turn, we'll be our delight, till our turning we come and rise.
Please join me in the words found in your order of service as we extinguish our chalice. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.
Let us leave this place ever open to the mystery, the questions, the riddle that is life. As we leave, let us be confident that there is a place, a community in our lives where we can inquire after the known and unknown and share our journey together. Go in peace, go in love. May our lives be a blessing. Amen and Ashe. Thank you so much for watching our service today. We're glad you're part of our online community, where we welcome people who are diverse in faith, ethnicity, history, as well as gender identity and sexual orientation. There are many different ways you can get involved in our community. One you can do right now is by clicking like below or subscribing to our channel. If you're interested in joining our congregation, please email us at membership@firstuuhouston.org. Thanks so much for joining us.